board. I mean, if you have, of course, any other question related to that or unrelated, you can always send me another message, or you can, wait for me at the end of the session, and I will gladly, be of assistance. But this particular session, as I was saying, I wanted to make it shorter, and not because I don't have time. Of course, I have, the time for you, but it is more related to the evidence. I think this evidence is a little bit more visual, but there is some conceptual elements, of course, that need to be developed a little bit. So, the basis of which this second evidence is going to be worked upon. So I would like to begin, by letting you know that we are going to be discussing about the different dimensions. What is it that is more no, not important, but the characteristic element of this evidence, which is this idea of deception, of being turned out. And lastly, this idea of a manual, which Mauricio, you sent a message, you are asking, instead of an infographic format, can I use Genially to make some kind of an interactive presentation? I mean, yeah, you can do so. And honestly, as long as you follow like this idea of it being like everything's gonna work fine. And maybe I should begin with that, right? So what is it about this particular manual that what is it special about this manual? I'd like for you to think that similar to the Global Shared Learning Classroom activity, which hopefully some of you remember, you guys did like a magazine, right? And in that magazine, you were asked to develop some specific points so people know about a specific problem in different regions and the kind of solutions that have been brought up to and that could be applied to your specific regions. In here, you are creating a manual where you're showing people how to move from a passive climate action to an active climate action. So how are you going to do that? That's going to be part of what we're going to be learning today. But that's the key message. You are now, hopefully, in a position where you can show people how to move from being passive to being active in 4 different dimensions that compose us. So during our semester, I hope that you noticed that we didn't only just focus about, facts of climate change. That was probably the first 2 and 3 weeks where you learn about climate change, what is Anthropocene, and international governance, right? And then later on, if you remember, and if you go back, you were thinking about how is climate change going to affect my dreams, my goals, how is going to change even my own personality, like traits in that matter. And that is what we mean with the personal dimension. We'll look a little bit more closely to that in a second. But I just want to state that, you had that activity, and then you have some other discussion threads where we're looking at citizenship, consumerism, and economic systems, and then the professional dimension, right? So you had in total 4 different elements upon which we wanted you to think, how can I understand my own being in a different way that is not deceitful? But don't worry, we'll bring everything together in just a couple of seconds. Ivana, you're asking whether this activity, this evidence, can be done in Canva. Yes, it can be done really in any tool. Like you can use PowerPoint, you can use slides from Google, you can use Genially, you can use Canva. It doesn't really matter, the tool itself. What matters is the content.
I
We
also,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt you.
no, don't worry. Go ahead.
Um, no, that I did want to use Canva, but I also had a doubt about the grades. I heard my other classmate ask in the beginning, since we're all stressed about that, but I just wanted to see if like how can we check in plan de evaluación the
Your
like how
specifics.
many points the activities count as, because I just keep getting notifications of like your final grade has been upgraded, like,
Uh-huh.
or updated, And when I enter Plan de Evaluación, I just see a column with like the amount of points I have, but I cannot see like how
The
much the
specific.
activities are worth.
Yeah, so you want to see at the specifics. Okay. Why don't we stay at the end of the session? And if not, we can talk on WhatsApp, but that is a good question. I mean, I'm pretty sure that some of you will have that same doubt. I will say though, just really, really fast. Uh, I'm not sure if, oh, anyways, I'll look into the specific of plan evaluation, but there is another button called grades. In that specific grades, I think that's where you should be able to look at the specific grades.
No, no,
However,
no. I can see like the grades, but in Plan de Evaluación is where we can see like how much the activities are worth in percentage towards the final grade. Like for example, I don't know, the evidence being 20% of the final grade or stuff like that.
you want to know like not how many points do you have per activity, but like how many points can you achieve?
Yes, because like
Like,
I have texted you about this in private message, and I was just wondering because like since the beginning of the
you mean this
semester,
particular
I
section?
I got like updates about the final grade, and it was, I mean, below average, and I was like, but I'm doing the activities and I'm getting good grades. I don't know why it's so low.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna a little bit extended for this particular question. That's not to say that it isn't important. Of course it is. If you want to know like how many points is each activity graded, or you know the amount of points that you can earn per activity, there is a specific button in home, and it is the section called evaluation scheme. In here you will be able to look at how many points is for each of the activities that we have done so far.
Okay, thank you.
That is one, and the other one, and maybe it's kind of related, but because at the end of the day, that particular website tells you just how many points are you able to, or will you be able to. Right now, I'm working on a particular dashboard. I'll probably be using Gemini for this, but at the same time, I'm looking for privacy matters. Um, I want to create something interactive where you can just, input your student ID and you'll get, the breakdown of every activity that we have had so far, how many points, I mean, what's the grade that you have earned for that particular activity, and at the end for you to see, how many points are you adding up with every activity. I think that's going to be the more transparent thing because, yes, as I've heard through time, some of you don't have access for some reason to that specific, which to me is really important. Like, how many points am I getting per activity, right? So I hope I'm really waiting. I just want that particular privacy matter to be solved. And after that, I'll take the decision and just put my efforts into creating either on Gemini or probably Looker Studio by Google, right? So yeah,
Okay, and at the end of the semester, will we have like a revision about grades or
we'll
like
probably, yes. I mean, we usually send a final message, and with that, you'll see what's your final grade. But we do have previously, and that's why I'm putting all my efforts into that matter for you to look it beforehand, because other
okay,
a lot of you are gonna be, asking about it, and we might get, lost with so many petitions, right?
okay, thank you,
So we'll do it before the last week. Ana
thank
Lucia,
you.
yeah.
Prof,
Yeah.
about what we're answering of doing this on Canvas, I'm wondering if like in the instructions it says that it's interactive, but I'm not sure how can we make an infographic interactive. Like, what do you mean by that? And can we just make it seem like very pretty and like stand out in Canvas? Or what do you mean with that?
Interactive just basically means that you can click on an element and you'll get a reaction, right? So for instance, I think everyone is looking at the infographic, right?
Yes.
Okay, so here is the plus button. I click on it and I get more information. The reason why we ask, or we suggest generally not ask, is that you can do this. And what this allows you is for you to, as you can see, not clutter an infographic with so much text. And for instance, this student, what they're doing is that they're given a scenario and they're on the plus button, they're doing the description of what's going on with that particular image, right? And how is it deceiving someone on the personal dimension. That is why we suggest Genially, but that does not mean that you can't do this in Canva. Actually, some students have done it. A lot of students have done it and they have earned like 100, right? So it's not a matter of where, but
So we can just have like links where you click on something and it opens to a new page.
I mean, if you need it, yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Sure, Emilio, I'll look at your email. Uma, I think you also have your hand up.
Thank you, teacher.
Yes.
Teacher.
Yes.
I
was
I'm
waiting
sorry.
for, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes,
Just one
please.
question. Well, the infography, the principal topics are greenwashing and it's like this. I'm wondering if we have to make one example for each topic on the same infography, or is four infographies for greenwashing and the other four for the other topics, or are on the same infography together?
Thank you for making that question, because that's actually the key aspect of this session. And it's not gonna be a simple answer, but let me just put it as straightforward as I can. You need to create 4 infographics, and each one is, the first one is the personal dimension, the consumer dimension is the second one, the third is the consumer one, and the fourth is the professional. Okay, so that's the key theme, or where all the reflection needs to go upon. The content is the following. You need to show people how have we been deceived, for instance, in a personal dimension, by specific mechanisms, which can be greenwashing examples, which can be selectivism examples, they can be false actions, they can be cultural elements, or discourses, narratives that have been employed so that it seems that we're doing the right thing when we're really not. That's the key. At the end of the day, that's what you're doing. And you're creating this manual so that you show people how we are usually manipulated towards those ends. And then not only the mechanisms, but to show them what can they do. Right? So that is why this is a climate action manual for dummies. I don't know if you've ever seen those books, like the yellow ones that have, like, I don't know, for instance, C++ or data science for dummies. And although it might sound like a bad word, this idea of dummies, what they want to say is that they're dumbing down, and I'm not agreeing with how they're putting it, but how they're making a complex topic seem more less complex. They want to make it accessible to the public. And this is what we are doing with this activity. Because usually when you think about climate action, you either think of environmental footprint, habits, consumer decisions, and sometimes climate activism. That's all people can think of when they hear climate action. And it's more than that. And that is what you want to show with this particular activity. But let's keep on then moving with this particular session. And like I said, I intended it to be shorter, but I know that there's a couple of questions up in the air. So again, this particular class is for you to think about in a different lens. We are human beings, which can be understood as being persons, as being, unique, and being citizens, and will be professional people, of course, in the future. You will have jobs and you will be taking consumer decisions throughout your life. And we want to think of these aspects in a different way. We want to see what really being ethical means. And I hope that you understand that being ethical is not about an ethic code, No, it's about how you move every day in your ordinary life and how every decision that you make have a specific background, a specific context upon which you take such decisions. And the idea is that we want people to understand what is behind those mechanisms and why is it important that we look at those deception mechanisms, right? So that is why we want everyone to understand that it doesn't matter if it's a small action. Every action counts because we're moving into a new culture. And that's what it means to be in a culture, for everyone to start behaving in a different way. And for us, at least here in our class, we think that these dimensions are going to be like the core of that particular new culture. But first, we want to understand what is a personal dimension. And I'll be honest, this is the one where more students get confused or where they get not a good grade, to be honest. And I think that it makes sense. This is the one that I see everywhere people not wanting to understand because climate change is demanding us to live in a different way. And we don't want to, it is difficult to take that and see that how we have been taught that we should be living is not compatible with what this planet can give us. And that is a difficult truth to swallow. But in our class, we want to understand the personal dimension as what makes us us, is the most core elements of our human existence. So for me, Luis, what kind of values do I have? What kind of beliefs do I have? What kind of desires, arguments, and personality traits do I have that make me different compared, for instance, to you, Omar, right? So those particular different elements are what makes us unique. And there are more, of course, you can think of more elements, some cultural traits, for instance, and some other cultural elements that especially you notice when you move in a city or to a city where people from all across the planet live, because those differences makes us special, right? So this is important. This is a personal matter where each of you have to look at how, and that's why you had an activity where you were asked, like, do you see how climate change might impact your values, your desires for the future, your dreams? For instance, some of you might be, wanting to be really successful in life, and that's great. But being successful does not necessarily mean to have a lot of money and do all of those things that, for instance, people in really rich countries might be doing right now, which have the highest, pollution, for instance, or CO2 emissions, right? So what does it really mean to be successful? It's climate change is asking us to reconsider that. And you will see that it's not only about those kind of decisions, which can be associated with habits, but it's also a way of understanding yourself. What do I want to be in the future? I want to be successful. What does it mean to be successful? Right? So that is why I think that this particular dimension, it's a little bit harder to understand. Whereas the citizen one, it's more about the personal, it's individual, like me, right? It's about me. But citizen is about the others, about my community, about people living in the same city as I, people, who have common interests, but also maybe having different interests with me. But at the end of the day, we live in a community and we want to defend us, because when we defend everyone, right? Or when we defend the common good, rather, that's when a community thrives, because we trust each other and we make each other work. That's why it's important for us to understand citizenship in a different lens. And consumerism, I think this is the most easiest one. This is about your consumption decisions, and they can be, from even consumption as it, related to energy, right? So your electric bill, gas, and that's why I was saying, like, there are some activities that might not necessarily be related to the personal one. They can also be related to the consumer decision, for instance. But at the end of the day, it's anything where money is interchanged. And the professional dimension is about asking yourself, how does my future job or my current job or my dream job contribute to climate change? And that is both the positive and the negative, because we all do impact in both ways. And for instance, I've always had like, for some reason, someone from psychology asking me, how is my, profession related to climate change? And luckily, I also major in psychology. So what I've seen is that there is a lot of resistance from therapists to accept that climate anxiety is a fact. And the argument is that it does not appear on the DSM. And that's all they do, right? So imagine that you're getting a patient who's living with climate anxiety, and you're like, that doesn't exist because it's not in my book. Of course, it's going to impact climate change, but every profession impacts in a different way and to a different degree. And that is why this particular manual, I feel, is really, really, really interesting. Me as a professor, of course. Now, after looking at these 4 dimensions, we need to understand all of these elements of deception. I'm using this metaphor of being tuned out just as a musical instrument, right? I'm really sad that I had to sell my guitar because I usually use my guitar to show you this metaphor. But imagine that when a guitar or just any other instrument, is tuned, it sounds beautiful. It sounds how it's supposed to. And then you put it with some other instrument, such as a voice or maybe a bass, whatever you like, whatever you're thinking of. And everything is tuned out. Well, it's going to sound great, right? Because every element is working accordingly. Now, with these dimensions, same thing happens. If one of them is tuned out, is not in tune, the rest of them are also going to be affected. And that's why, to me, the personal dimension is the most important one. Because if you fail to see, for instance, how your future aspirations might, create a negative impact to climate change, and those are sustained by your worldview, which isn't, sustainable, well, of course, your consumption decisions are not going to be great. Your professional ones are not going to be great, and maybe your citizenship perception might not be aligned to what our planet needs. Right? And that is why it's really important that we understand deceptions. So again, try to think it this way. Someone who is in tune with their dimensions is someone who has a deep reflection and their actions are coordinated to all of those specific dimensions. Whereas someone who is out of tune is when their climate action is faulty or maybe relevant, using some of the notions we've heard in our class, because there are some mechanisms happening, right? So this is why showing how we're being tuned out is important. And please, don't feel discouraged. And I say this because we don't want to say, I'm not trying to say that if you are on this situation that you feel guilty and that, you should be punishing. No. Like, this is a really complex matter. And I don't know if you saw the movie Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro. I've always liked that story, particularly the book by Mary Shelley, because I think there's a cultural elements hidden in there that's really important. We don't get asked to be born in this world. For me, that's an existential matter, right? And the second one is that we inherit, like, we are composed of so many things. Our parents, aspirations for ourselves, their worldview, the cultural elements that they inherit from when they were, being brought up to. We inherit all of that, and we take trust in that they're the best that they can be. And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Or sometimes, they have a due date. For instance, climate change, I feel that it's a matter that is showing us that the way that our parents and their parents and their parents live is incompatible to what the planet can afford. So that's why, please take it in a rather humble, is that the word? With humility. We are trying to show people that we are all faulty in some degree, and that's fine. But we should be careful into not falling again. And that is why we need to understand what does each dimension, how does it look like for a consumer dimension to be deceitful. So for instance, a consumer dimension that is actually in tune can be seen in someone who understands how greenwashing is operating. And then when they go, to HEB, to Walmart, to whatever shopping center that you go, even if it's not food, you can take a look at all of the products and then you can understand at least a little bit of why some might damage more than the others. And then your consumer decision is going to be guided by that. I understand that maybe my economy is not as, I don't have the highest economy, for instance, but I understand that this product, it's better than this other one, so I'll take that decision, right? So that is someone who is in tune. But someone who is out of tune in the personal dimension is that particular person who is telling themselves, or maybe they got this argument from someone else and they started believing it. And that thought is the following: my contribution will never be as important as the fossil fuel industry. So I will continue buying environmentally damaging products. I've known people like that, and I've heard that with my own ears, and sadly, even by some of my family members, right? So what is it about this example? I would like for you to think a little bit about this example. And please, on the chat, let me know. Do you think that there might be another dimension happening in this green example, the one that says out of tune? Or is it just the personal dimension? What do you think? And I say this because there are some examples, and this is the tricky part, where more than one dimension might be happening. And that's why I'm asking you, do you feel that this example has more than one dimension? And if you feel that it is, which one do you think that might be happening? I'm going to block the one that I don't want you to think about, actually. So again, the example is my contribution will never be as important as the fossil fuel industry. So I will continue buying environmentally damaging products. I'm sorry, class, for some reason my computer disconnected that. Yeah, so we were talking about whether this example has more than one dimension. And I've noticed that there was a lot of silence in there, and that's fine. Let me help you on that matter. Okay, so yeah, Annelise, go ahead.
I think that it is also in the consumer dimension.
All right, can you expand on that?
Because it also depends on what you're buying something, and you know that that thing that you buy also have an impact.
Exactly. Yeah, and to me, you will see that there is a comma that makes that, those two dimensions happen. So the first part, my contribution will never be as important as the fossil fuel industry. That's the personal dimension. And then the second one happens afterwards, after that. So I continue, blah, 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 blah. Go ahead, Javier.
So, profe, the personal is like the choice you make as a person, no? O sea,
Rather, in here is the thought.
excuse me?
It's what you're thinking, not so much the decision.
Okay, what you're thinking. And then the consumer part would be like the options you have as a person, no? So you can't buy the magical powder that doesn't exist. You can only buy stuff that's packaged in plastic, or clothes that's plastic, everything, so that.
Yeah, but at the same time, and this is the really interesting part, when it comes to the solutions, because you will be asked to think about some solutions, I would like for you to think about the magic powders that you were saying, because it is true. Like the systemic aspect behind it is that even if you take the most environmentally friendly decision, you need to ask yourself whether that is the best decision, right? And the truth of the matter is that no, it is, the product could be better. But you also need to ask yourself, why don't we have the best products out there, or the best ways, for instance, as you were saying, plastic, the best ways to get my product, right?
So
And
it's
that has
more
to
it's
do
more
with,
like a circle, no? We have to think about it like a reciprocal circle in which like my personal thoughts is the shape my personal things, but then I go into the profession and I shape at least what I can do for that better thing, and then as a citizen and as a consumer, no? So it's like a circle.
yeah, exactly. Everything is connected, and everything can go and move back. So for instance, I just made this connection. Let's say that you have always been like a fan of technology, right? Throughout your life, since you were a kid. And then at the end of the day, you move into robotics or something like that, and machine learning. And then because you believe that, through the development of technology, that climate change, might stop happening, right? And you would be like, okay, what's the problem with that? First and foremost, there is science behind it, behind my next argument, which is not only about technology. Of course, it is important, but it's way more than that. It's also the economic system, it's
The social
also
problems.
cultural elements, and that's all backed up by the IPCC. And when a person is like, nope, it's just the technology, and they don't want to listen, then that's ideology. And it's an ideology that's really backed down in their personal dimension, because it is a belief right now. It is unquestionable, but it is working as a deception because it's more than technology, right? And when that thought does not allow you to have a conversation with it, it's just right there, it's not going to move, then it is wrong, because we need to understand that, especially social matters, right? uh, are there, they don't have like an abstract truth. It's constantly changing. And because climate change is a social natural problem, the solutions are more on the social side. And that's why technology is important. Yes, it is. It is central. It is one of those really important elements, but it is not what's going to solve the matter. And if you are working on that profession and you think that that's the only thing, and then you look at people like Elon Musk, for instance, I'm just saying the most obvious one right now, but if you feel that those kind of people are the ones that the world should be pushing without looking at this ideology first, of course you're going to be replicating it in your profession and your citizenship and your consumer decisions as well. So yeah, everything can be seen as a loop, and hence why I believe that the personal dimension is really important. Thanks for that particular question. Yeah. So now that we have seen some examples and what does it mean to be deceived and whatnot, now which are like the conceptual framework, let's move into what exactly are you going to be working on, right? Because the conceptual matters, as I was saying, they can be like kind of muddy, but when we start moving into more the concrete aspects, and then the example that I have here with me, I think it's going to make more sense. So the first thing is, try to think that you have 4 pages where you need to work, okay? The first one for the personal, blah, 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 blah. But each page, and you can use the same template, by the way, but try to think that each page is divided into parts. Okay, the first part is where you show the deception, and the second part is where you show the solutions, right? So for the first part, here's what you need to do. First, you need to identify what's the deception mechanism. And of course, you need to give us context, right? You need to give us that particular scenario where it's happening. What is that situation, right? If it's, for instance, the personal dimension, you can give us, the cultural expression. You can show us an example of a thought that, has been given by someone, or, you can give us a dialogue where your parent is like, I don't even know, or a friend, is telling you like, why do you want to have, a family when you know that that's going to impact climate change, right? So that's a fallacy. And it's really important that we understand that it's not the amount of people that we have, but the way that we live, and particularly the way that the 1% tends to live, or the 10%, should I say, when it comes to the global matter. Yes, Mauricio.
Okay, so in that part, it doesn't have to necessarily be a corporate campaign. It can be, I don't know, when people tell you to separate trash because something, something, something. To that, we link any of the 9 greenwashing types or the pathos, ethos, logos, and that's the mechanism we have to identify, right?
Exactly. I
Okay.
thank you so much for putting it that way, because you made it more simple than I was thinking of it. That's basically what you have to do. You give us a scenario, just as you said, for instance, someone who's telling you about recycling, for instance, and then you talk about what kind of deception is happening, whether it's one of the 9 types of greenwashing, whether it's a fallacy, but you have to be specific, right? So it's not just it's greenwashing. No, which greenwashing is. And then not only say, okay, it's green by definition, but you have to say, okay, but green by definition is described as, and then you give us the citation. You can use the Genialist, and if you use the Genialist that we have in our class, take them as presentations. And then you give us what's green by association, and then you show where it's happening on the image, right? So another important thing, the examples can be really anything. For instance, for the personal dimension, I've seen some students give us memes, right? They put us the image, and then they do a brief description, and with the pop-up, they describe why in that meme there is a fallacy, right? And particularly because memes hide or show, sometimes they're not hiding, but rather showing, something deceitful. So again, you have to give us a scenario. It doesn't matter the medium, like you can use videos, you can use images, you can use text, you can use whatever you like, but give a little bit of that particular context. Then show, rather than just telling, type of mechanism that is happening, and then explain how is it affecting, right? We'll look at an example in here. This student, for instance, from a couple of semesters ago, Laura, and I'm sorry that this is an example in Spanish, because in our class we have to work it in English rather. Why didn't it load? Oh, I have it open here. Yeah, that's true. Okay. So in this example, first take a look at, she has 4 pages, okay? And this is the personal, this is the citizen one. I think this is the professional one, and lastly, the consumer dimension, right? You can have a 5th one, for instance, if that 5th one is about, maybe the cover page, that's fine. Some students also have turned in infographics with 6 pages, or the last one is where they put all of the sources that they use. But in here, for instance, Laura, what she did is that she actually used the footnote to add every source that she needed to put in this first dimension. She also wrote her name and her student ID number in the upper right section, so that also helps. And as you can see, she's doing some kind of in Spanish we say bestiario, which used to be ancient books or old books where you would have like different types of animals, right? But in here, she's using that as a metaphor, right? So the narcissistic piece number 1, and then she gives us the context. We're going through an awful situation. I think that after I'm done, things will get better. Say whilst tweeting hashtag pray for Amazonians from the commodity of her home, right? And here on the plus button, then she starts talking about selectivism, right? What is it? And then, how is that mechanism actually affecting, right? And then she added a small video to actually, give more trustfulness to her argument. This video by UNICEF not only creates a dramatic, it's not a dramatic video, but also shows us, that impact of selectivism doesn't really change much, right? So this is what's happening. She gave us the context, same one over here, and then when you click on the plus button, you get the identification of the mechanism happening, which in this case, for instance, is just indifference. And then she talks about, with this quote, why is indifference really important? And in this same quote, she's showing how this in being indifferent towards the problem actually is deceitful, right? So as you can see, when it comes to text, it can be brief if you know how to use your words, right? So also, I think what helps is maybe try to think it this way. When you're working on this evidence, like picture the person that you know from your either family or friend circle that it is the most climate denier, right? I think all of us have at least one family member like that. And imagine that with this activity, you want to persuade them into, rather than falling for these deception mechanisms, and actually help them move into a climate action, at least perspective, right? So that's, try to frame when you're working in that way, and maybe it helps a little bit more when it comes to the persuasion aspect. Now, you should be wondering, okay, what kind of examples can I then bring? Or how should I think of the examples? So I'd like to think of each dimension this way. For instance, the personal dimension, I immediately think about climate change deniers' arguments because they are thoughts, because they are the way that they understand the world and the reason why they're not gonna be changing one jot, right? So through these you can use these arguments and show where is the fallacy. But you can also, use popular expressions. You can use memes, because in memes we also see expressions that discourage. Or you can use examples of inconsistency. So, for instance, I remember a couple of years ago, I came across this video by Mr. Peace where he was, having this video of how he wanted to help the environment, and he helped plant, I don't quite remember the amount of trees, but it sounded like quite a ton of trees. And oh my God, he's a good person, you notice in the chat and whatnot. And then on the next video, he had another one where he was polluting, like immensely. At least when it comes to thinking of, he's only one person, and of course all of the team that's behind him. But that shows inconsistency, and that shows how this person in specific does not have a personal dimension in tune. Because the framework that he had behind it might be related to capitalistic motives, right? And he's not questioning them. And in here, we might even be connecting it to either consumption or even citizen aspects, right? But try to think it this way, particularly climate change deniers argument, popular expressions that you might be hearing on social media from your family, those definitely work. The citizen dimension, first and foremost, started thinking with different points of view. One is me in a community, right? So how is it that in a community, we might be discouraging ourselves? I don't know if you have heard of this metaphor, but in Mexico, we, at least when I was younger, we used to say that we live as if we were in a bucket full of crabs, and we are all the crabs, right? Why that metaphor? Because what crabs tend to do is when they see like a crab getting out of the bucket, they tend to pull them back into the bucket, right? So similarly, in here, what we want to say is that when a citizen sees some other tribing, they might try to do something similar. And that is the discouraging part of it, right? So in here, try to think of how we as a community discourage ourselves, but at the same time, maybe try to think it this way, how the government uses this type of mechanisms to manipulate our citizenship aspect and, rather than being active, being passive. One example I can think of is when Andrés Manuel López Obrador, for instance, when he was working with El Tren Maya, they noticed that people were getting a little bit alarmed because of the environmental damage. And then they started creating these different campaigns. So people felt, that there was no problem with it, right? So through this campaign, the government, they greenwashed. And this can be an example of how greenwashing also operates in citizenship. It stopped the effervescence of the activism, at least nationally, to evolve into something else, right? And selectivism, also has a similar effect. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It can also come, from an organization. It can come from and sometimes it even helps, for instance, when you see the links between an organization and a business enterprise, right? They can also be related, right? So try to think in that way. Me and my community, or the government and I. How do we discourage ourselves? And then the consumer dimension, it's just about greenwashing examples. And you can even use the one that you use for the first evidence, I'm sorry. That's also valid. And then lastly, the professional dimension. And here you have to think about your specific future job, what you would like to be working in the future. And then you need to think of what kind of habits do you think might be related to some kind of denial, into moving in environmentally decisions. Maybe some popular expressions in the professional community. Sometimes, for instance, it's more of a matter even of ideology, when you're like, well, I mean, of course, I understand environmental damage, but we don't want to have cost. So we're going to put more attention to those costs over environmental good actions, right? So that's ideological. Sometimes it's just ignorance, right? So those can also be examples in the professional dimension. But this one is I think the personal one could be really personalized, but the professional one is even more because you're thinking of you as a future professionist. In my case, for instance, it could be something related to either research or, for instance, I could talk about some researchers who are, climate deniers, right? And the arguments that they could bring about how research is manipulated and blah, 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 right? Those could be examples, at least in my own professional dimension. So again, first part is about the deception happening. And you can think of it through all of these different examples or categories of how deception happens. But this doesn't mean that that's the only way to frame it. You can think of so many other examples, right? And then lastly, when it comes to the solutions, this is also important. And solutions, I think you can, that section, you can start to think it this way. You can either take take the examples that you show earlier and then show people what kind of solutions are actually the right ones. How would you have solved those two examples that you shared earlier, right? That can be a way of solving that part. The other way is just giving examples that aren't as connected to that. I've seen both ways and both work. I feel that at least when it comes to a narrative or storytelling, the first option makes more sense, but it doesn't really matter. I think both can actually work. Also, solutions. Please don't be general or abstract or vague. For instance, education is a solution. Okay, what's the problem with that? I'm not saying that education isn't a solution. It is. But what kind of what kind of education? And education to whom? And what kind of education has been shown to be more efficient? There is research about that. And that's the kind of solutions that you need to show. It's not just giving, some random solution that you thought, but justifying that. If you have a hunch, research on it. Or you can ask me, like, teacher, I would like to see whether this solution makes sense. Can you help me? And then we can work on it, right? But it is important that these solutions have at least a source, right? And hence, we are ending now with the formal aspects because even though this is of course a manual and it has to be a little bit creative, we're asking you to still follow the APA format, that you use infographics or presentation. I'm sorry, or a presentation, as some of you were sharing earlier, and that you also have a reference section. Now, these references, you can either put them on the manual or you can just put them on the document that you're going to be uploading. This document, needs to have the specific URL that you get with Genially or Canva, but make sure first and foremost that that, for instance, this is the example that I was showing you. This button in here, it says share, and try to always take a look that this is a shareable one. And then just to make sure, you can always use the incognito, navigation and just copy and paste and see if it loads. If it loads, then you're fine. But if it's not loading, then you're not, right? And here I know that this is a correct one because it says view. And I think that maybe my internet is not as good as I think it should. But I know that this view that Genially is actually gonna give me the right address for me to check on it. And I say this because we also have students that, they're editing their Genially, right? And then they just copy and paste this URL, not this one, but the other one from the edition section. And when you share that link to me, I can't access your edition, right? So I will not be able to take a look at it. When you are working on your Genially, I think you will see this share icon on the upper right section. It will first ask you to publish your work, and then it will allow you to, to get the URL. But all of that, and this is where I'm going to be ending. Please, again, remember that there are examples that might connect different dimensions. And it is about the kind of language that you use that is gonna show whether you're putting in the right dimension. So that's why it's really, really important that if you're gonna use it for those 2 or 3 dimensions, that you make sure that you're describing it well. Okay? So please, 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 please just make sure to use the right language. If you're talking about an example, for instance, that impacts consumer dimension and personal dimension, make sure to show how it's deceiving your thoughts, your personality, your beliefs. And then for the consumer dimension, show how that mechanism is impacting the consumer dimension, not through the thoughts, but just the consumer dimension. Because they're using green by association, and it makes you think, or it persuades you that this is an environmentally product because it's has all the visual and textual elements that sound environmentally friendly, such as green leaves, nature, or words related to nature, right? So those can be different ways to use language to your advantage. And then the last one, try to have fun, like try to be creative. this should be like a down-to-earth guide that helps others move into being rather active in their climate action. So as I was saying earlier, have someone in mind when you're writing this manual. And with that class, I end up this rather longer session that I intended to have. But I don't know if anyone has any questions that you would like to be helped at least for this second evidence. And if you have any other questions, of course, we can also take a look, but I'd rather be after, we officially end the session.
Profe, no, thank you. I assume you'll be on WhatsApp available.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll leave the computer to process the video. I'll upload it to YouTube, and then I'll share it to your WhatsApp channel. And I'll also share the presentations, I think.
Perfect.
Tomorrow, I'm intending to have another session where maybe rather than go through the same presentation, maybe we can see some of the work that some of you have, and maybe with that help you, if you have some specific questions, that could be something that I might be able to do some. So let's organize that maybe tomorrow or no, this night I'll send the poll. So maybe we can have 1 or 2 sessions.
Thank you so much, Profe. Have a good afternoon.
You too, Javier. Thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Teacher, I have a question about what you were just mentioning, about the different examples being like it could be 2 dimensions at the same time. And my question is if I use it as 1 dimension, because I have my doubts on one example I chose for the personal dimension. I think it could fit under consumer too. I mean, under citizen too, but I'm just concerned that because it fits under 2, you would not consider it correct.
Can we be a little bit more specific? Maybe we can talk about,
Yeah.
What example is it, and then I'll help you frame it.
Yeah, so I can share it real quick. I have no problem saying it. It's about how my family recycles old bottles, but we don't know where exactly they take them. So if the organization is actually certified. So I think that would be citizen also because it's about the community, but it also is about our personal practices. So that's what I'm concerned about. If you might take it as, I mean, I can justify it why it should be personal, but it would be correct, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can take both examples for both dimensions, right? So, for instance, I'm sorry. What I was thinking is when it comes to the citizen, as you were saying, is that of course you want to do a good job on it, but maybe the government has created all of this propaganda for you to, for instance, recycle or have your own recycle bins. But at the end of the day, maybe a journalist or someone dig a little bit into the matter, and what they notice is that after they gather all of those different categories of desechos, I'm sorry, I lost the word. They end up in the same place.
Yeah.
So it didn't really matter, right? Or maybe they don't have the technology to actually use some of those,
Yes.
desechos, right? So that could be a citizen example, right? The personal one, I think it would have to be someone somewhat like, I'm not saying this is the case of your family, of course, but for instance, a family that thinks that just by recycling, they're just, great people, right? And the problem with that is that it needs to be more than that. It needs to change. And you can show, for instance, an inconsistency, something like, so my family and I, we recycle every product. So we understand that, what being environmental means. And then you can add some like a punchline that said whilst, taking their 10th travel to Cancun this year.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, being a little bit cynical or something like that shows that inconsistency in how they don't really have a systemic perspective into being a personal climate action.
Mm. Okay, so now that you like put it that way, I think I can use it as personal and as citizen. So I can use the same example and just explain it and justify it differently, right? Because
Exactly.
what you just mentioned about making sure that it's not contaminated with other plastics, that was part of my explanation. So I think it would fit under citizen, and what you mentioned, like inconsistencies on our lifestyles, would be more for the personal dimension, right?
Mhm. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And one other question, I just wanted to confirm that for part one, which we are only explaining the harmful attitudes, we do not have to mandatorily use a reference, like, right? Because I am justifying it by what was provided during the course, like the Genialis and the presentations, but I'm not necessarily for all using a scientific resource.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, you're asking about whether you can use Genially as part of your resources. Maybe indirectly, not you were maybe you weren't asking that directly, but I would rather ask you to think it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
and yes, actually, you can use I how to cite presentations in APA. There is
Okay, so I can cite your presentations as a reference.
exactly as if they were
Okay.
references. Let me just get the specific URL. And when it comes to the authors, you can put my name into it since I was
Mm-hmm.
created them. But there is in the chat that specific URL. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. I'm sorry, I can't figure out whether Fernando or Daniel, which one of you raised your hand first. But Fernanda, why don't you go ahead?
Teacher, I just have a doubt because, for example, for manual for citizen,
Mhm.
I was I found the scientific evidence for both of the things that I want to put on the infographic, which
Okay.
are like support of global action rather than local action is
Mhm.
sometimes like a misconception, and also the lack of support for environmental activism.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just wanted to know if like they seem like rational, and also for the manual for professional, I approach it in a different way. For example, there's a lot of corporations that do like Earth Day promotion, but they actually lack real action. And
Mhm.
there's also companies trying to plant trees, but there's no further commitment to that. So I just wanted to make sure like if those seem also plausible.
Yeah, so the first questions, I mean, just without looking at specifics, they sound about right. But if you want to go into the specifics, we can totally do so either right now or maybe later on. We can continue having that conversation in WhatsApp. But they do sound
Okay.
right. And then the second matter, it also seemed right, but I wanted to ask you, what are you majoring in? What's your career here at Tech? Yes.
Law.
Okay. I mean,
That's why I'm talking about corporate responsibility.
there you go. Okay. Yeah. You can connect it in that way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Totally.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, teacher.
No, thank you, Fernanda, for your questions. Daniel.
Teacher, I wanted to I like listening to you to from the reunion. I have like more doubts if what I did was correct because I already started the infographics, but it's taken me like a very long time. I haven't even gotten done with the first one, and I wanted to show you like what I have
Yeah, sure.
because I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to log in tomorrow or even work because I'm traveling.
Mhm.
But I wanted to show you because it's
Yeah, sure.
do you mind if I share you the screen?
No, please go ahead.
Mm, so this is what I have. I don't know if it's
Okay.
If it's can you see it?
Yes, I can. Let me just see whether I can zoom in. Okay. At the bottom right, there are two arrows that point to the upper right and down left position. I don't know, next to pages, páginas, uno de dos, and then yeah, that one.
Okay, yeah, perdón.
No, not true. And then there's a magnifier. Yeah, okay, you can also do that. Okay, great. Okay, I love that first paragraph below the personal dimension. You're showing, how to understand the personal dimension in a practical. I love
Profe,
it.
disculpe la falta de ortografía, todavía no lo termino de corregir, pero o sea,
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't
ya ve
worry
que escribí infographics horrible.
Don't worry about it. Okay, so let's take a look at the examples. It says the carbon footprint individual blame shift. Okay, just by looking at the title, I know that this is a right one because we sadly have been thought that, as I was saying at the beginning, all we are is just a carbon footprint, right? And it's more than that. So yeah, you give us if everyone just reduce their carbon footprint, we could solve climate change. It's a common belief repeated by millions while won't reduce 71 global emissions. Okay, why is this harmful attitude? Because people are exhaustingly calculating the personal emissions, changing light bulbs, taking showers, while feeling guilty about their environmental impact. Meanwhile, they ignore that companies like BP spend more than 200 million promoting the carbon footprint concept, especially to shift the blame from corporate to individual responsibility. Now, I love this in the sense that it is showing people how should they understand the problem, right? That through this guilty mechanism, it diverts the attention.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's a great example. The only that maybe I was considering is, for instance, what I had to do is to identify what type of mechanism is. And you said that it is. No, I should ask you, were you focusing on guiltiness as a mechanism?
Yes.
Okay. I mean,
like for the greenwashing, you mean?
Yeah, for the first example, because in here you can talk about how making people feel guilty makes them less concentrated towards what is a problem happening behind, which is meanwhile they ignore the companies, blah 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 blah. To me, that's
I put it in the greenwashing explanation.
okay.
And how does greenwashing manipulates in this example?
Yeah. Okay. So sorry. I thought that was the second one. Yeah. No, that's perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
So
Beautiful.
this is the second one, and I really like the way I put the examples. I thought that they are like pretty well organized, but I'm having issue with the second part of the infographics because I didn't read the whole thing from when I was doing it. So I was like doing 0.1 and I was doing like 1.1, which is the first example, then 1.2, which is the second example, and then I saw that there was like a second point for each infographic, which is the actions.
Yeah.
And I have this big issue because it's like a lot of text and I don't know how to do it, and I don't know how to do it like how to put like more text. But I saw that we could like record ourselves and add it to the infographics to explain it more, because I don't know how I'm gonna fit everything because it's like a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So two things here. One, I'm noticing that you're giving a lot of different actions, and I love it. But if you are feeling that space is a problem, I'd suggest that maybe you can add 2, 3 examples, and as long as they are well developed, that's great. Now, what do I mean with have a good foundation? And it is the fact that not only show which are the correct actions, but show why.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
So you can develop, as I was saying, maybe this first column with one example and then the next one with another example. And that would be great.
Es que, bueno, lo pongo en español, profe, es que me...
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Es, o sea, como hay 5 puntos desglosados que vienen en el punto 2, o sea, que pide, o sea, que es cómo evadir las greenwashing traps, cómo pasar del selectivism al personal agency, luego transformation of personal practices,
Yeah,
luego sustainable personal networks, y luego hasta abajo, que es la que todavía no hago, es la de correct understanding of crisis.
yeah.
Pero no sé, o sea, no sé si poner solamente una de cada una para que no se vea tan lleno, o si dejar 3 por cada una, porque, o sea, quería que fuera lo más completo posible.
Okay. I'll take this moment because I don't know if maybe this is the problem, right? But I take
Ujú,
also this moment because maybe someone will see this video and might be feeling in the same situation as you are. And
ujú,
if I'm getting your question or your problem correctly, is related to the description that you can find in um in Canvas. And let me just replace what you're sharing right now, just to to pinpoint it.
ujú,
Jijung, maybe you might also see this. So on the instructions in our page, you first have this part one, where the thing that we have repeated so much, and then
ujú,
the second part where the illustration of the actions. And what you're saying, if I'm not mistaken, Daniel, is
ujú,
particularly these elements, right?
ujú.
Okay.
The first one, it's not projecting pod.
Okay. So if you were saying about these 5 points, what
Ujú,
my direct answer is, you don't have to talk about all of them. You can just choose one or two.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to give one example per one of those 5 points. You can select 1, 2, 3.
Mm,
In your case, for instance, I would say pick 2, but develop them a little bit more. Like, not only tell us what to do, but why your solution is the right one.
ujú. Okay.
And that way you will have enough space for you to articulate that. Because, see, describe how to implement your proposal and why they are effective. And maybe not in all examples, effective might be the right word. You can also think of it like, ethically speaking, why is the best decision?
Ujú,
And you can think of scientific literature if it's needed. For instance, when it comes to climate activism, people usually think like, oh, of course it's not going to work because there's just a few people on the streets, and if I go, I'm just going to be one more person. So blah 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 blah. But if you showed people the research that some sociologists have done about how much percentage of the population is needed to push specific agendas, people would be surprised.
ujú,
It's not that many. It's not even it's not 100%, definitely. It's
ujú,
maybe 50%, right? So that kind of data persuades you into taking that decision of, okay, if it's not that high of a number, I might actually be a good addition. And I don't, I also know how to this and this and this and this. And just to give you an example, here in Nuevo León, when Un Río por el Río, this climate group started, defending Rio Santa Catarina, I was talking with some of the climate activists because one of them, she was a student of mine and someone which I learned a lot from, actually, Andrea Villarreal. And one of the conversations that we had, I remember she was kind of scared, saying like, it's just, teacher, we're just a few. And the government is a big machine. How are we gonna do it? And I remember telling her like, it's not about the number. It's about the impact that you make discursively. And then, they started doing research. They started, inviting a lot of people into the river. And then, you know, people started talking about it. Medium started talking about it. And even though, the group didn't grow as big as, I don't know, a department of the government, they still made a huge impact. They stopped all those actions that Desmonte, that the government here in Nuevo León was planning to do, right? So you can use that as an example, for instance, on why a solution for citizenship might be the right one.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm
Sí,
sorry, I
es-
maybe extended a little bit more with that, but I mean, if you wanna use all those 5, my only concern is that you don't have enough space to show why. And this is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I run out of space. I put like graphs and facts and everything like that, and I ran out of space to do the second part.
Yeah.
But after hearing you, I think that I will choose like 3 actions that cover the 5 points, then the implementation, and I think it can fit in the square. But I also think, I don't know if it's like a little disproportionate, because part 1 is like 70% of the infographic, and then part 2 is like a little square. So I don't know if there's an issue with that.
No, I mean, when it comes to aesthetic, don't worry about it. As long as you're giving what is needed, no problem. For instance, you were also saying that, that maybe you could add a video. If you can embed a video, that also helps. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. We only submit like the link, right? We don't submit like the like a PDF, or do we? Because if I submit the link, I can put the video, but if I don't, I think I can't.
What do you mean with the link or a document?
Um, it's because if I submit like the link for Canva, the video will appear when my professor opens the link. But if
Yeah.
I submit like the document with the infographic,
I get you.
the video won't appear.
Okay, so that's another important question, and I always forget about that one. And if I'm not mistaken, you are asking because in here we say convert it to PDF and upload it to Illumin, or in here it says PDF document. Okay.
Yes.
Great question. What we mean with that is not so much that you finish working on Canva and then you download it as a PDF. Rather, what you're saying, the first option, you open a Word document, you use your cover page with your student ID, you put the URL link for the Canva, Genially, whatever you're working on. Then you put the URL. I mean, of course, you put the URL and then you upload this document, but as a PDF. The reason why we ask of this is because, even Illumin is not working right now. Okay. Illumin for a I don't know, for a reason, it works better with PDF documents rather than with docs. We have had the bad experience that when students upload their work documents, they corrupt for some reason on the Illumin platform, and sometimes, that's a problem, right? So that's
Yeah.
why when you upload a document as PDF with just the URL, that's the best solution.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. So I will do it like that. I will try to do the video to explain the whole infographic, but also to become more specific in the second point.
All right.
Because I believe that that's important. And I also wanted to ask you if you could, for the final exam, if you could open like the answers for the last quizzes to study, or because it's this weekend, right? The exam.
Yeah. I want to give you guys a big rumble and let you know about that in a couple of minutes. But I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, teacher.
All right. I don't know if there's any other question, or maybe you, Jijung. And if not, thank you so much, for staying online. And if there's any other question, please remember that you can contact me. Okay. So with that, thank you. Have a great day.